Hello and welcome to the Patrick Chapman Show. I'm Patrick Chapman and here we go. So I have a lot to talk about, lots and lots of things to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about any of them because I got something else to talk about that's more important than all that stuff, even though I have a lot of other things to talk about. I'm only going to talk about one thing today, and the reason is this. On Saturday last week I got this in the mail. It's a little booklet written by my friend Adrian Jutner. It's, if you can see it on the camera there, it's My Termite Odyssey, or The Formosans Are Passé, by Adrian S. Jutner, BSF, Master of Forestry, Duke 70. But this is written in 2025, okay, so there's the date there. Good, so we're going to be talking about termites, and I have to say that it's going to be long, because this is a good 20-page pamphlet, and I'm going to read the whole thing straight through. And it might get a little dry at moments, but I'm going to ask you to stick with me. If you like me at all, if you're my friend, if you're my subscriber, listen, and I think it'll be worth it. Sometimes you got to dig a little to get to the gold nuggets. And digging is hard work, and it takes time, and you don't like it, but then you get the gold, and that's the fun. So we're going to try to get some gold today. And I think this show is going to be specifically for 3 types of people. And if you're not one of those types, you can still listen, but you might find it's not for you. I think it's for anybody in the press, because I think there's some stories in here that might be worth digging into and giving some traction, you know, giving some press, some ink. So if anybody's a reporter out there or knows a reporter of any kind, I think there's some stories in here. And then the next type would be the scientific types. Anybody interested in biology especially, and also chemistry maybe. I think those types of people would be interested in this. And then the next type of person who could be interested is anybody who comes from or lives in or has anything to do with New Orleans. If you got anything to do with New Orleans, then this could be interesting to you, because Adrian is a scientist, and he's got his feet on the ground in New Orleans. He knows all the streets, and he's covered that city like a net with his business, cutting down trees. He's an expert in trees, and he knows the city, you know, from the bottom up, let's say. And even right now at this moment, here it's 9:30 at night almost, and I'm a little bit tired, but we're going to do this because I tried to do it yesterday and it didn't work, and we're going to get it done today, tonight. He's probably out spraying caterpillars. Buck moth caterpillar season just started. If you have any problems with buck moth caterpillars or any kind of pests, you let me know and I'll let him know, or just get in touch with Adrian Jutner. And he's probably out spraying caterpillars right now, if he's not done with the day yet. And also I want to say, put a comment in the comment section, or ask a question if you have a question, either to me directly or to Adrian, and I'll send it along to him. He'll get it. And let me ask you a question, which I would like you to comment in the comment section, and that's, what contact have you had with caterpillars? Have you ever had them in your house or in your yard? Have you seen them at all? Have you had any problems, or do you have any questions about caterpillars? Because that's the topic of this paper, and that's what we're talking about today. And this has a lot to do with the whole city of New Orleans. And I'm going to get started right now, and I'm just going to read as fast as I can and try to make it as clear. I might stop to make comments along the way, but let me just get a sip of water, and here we go. Okay, start with the title again, because that's how you start. My Termite Odyssey, or The Formosans Are Passé, by Adrian S. Jutner, BSF, Master of Forestry, Duke 70, 2025. My Termite Odyssey, by Adrian S. Jutner. The idea that termites don't attack live, healthy trees has been a maxim of forestry dogma for decades. Truly, American species of termites don't aggressively colonize live trees. They are found in rotting wood or invading wooden structures. To us, the idea of termites in live trees was unheard of. That was dogma. Termites were only given a passing mention in forestry. Indeed, the late tree god Alex Shigo categorically disputed the idea of termites eating live, healthy trees. Missouri, my home state, with its cold winter climate, didn't have much to do with termite infestations in homes or otherwise. Formosan termites were not on the radar in 1975 when I started doing tree work full time. I quit my job as a quality control chemist, traveled to the USSR with a bunch of botanists to the 12th International Botanical Congress, and bought my first house at the time. By coincidence, this house was just outside the main gate of the Algiers Naval Station, ground zero for Formosan termites in the U.S. But I knew nothing of this at the time. 3 years later, my new bride and I bought a bigger house just 2 blocks away, still near the Navy base. Curiously, a crew was drilling 2-inch diameter holes in bald cypress trees in Berman Park nearby. They were attaching PVC pipes in the holes connected to plastic cylinders, all mysterious. I phoned up a fellow Duke forestry buddy who had a job with the southern region of the U.S. Forest Service. He sent me a paper from the Pest Control Journal dated February 1967. The author, Raymond H. Beal of the Southern Forestry Experiment Station, USFS, wrote that formosans had been discovered in Houston in 1965. The termite was first described in Formosa, Taiwan, in 1909. It has been found in boats, ships, dredges, boats. He's got boats, I think a lot of boats, piers, and floating dry docks. Formosans were identified in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, mainland China, the Philippines, and South Africa. Formosan termites were introduced to Hawaii around the turn of this last century. Other sources cite the presence of formosans in the littoral regions of the southern home islands of Japan. I had to look up littoral. It means seacoast or coastline regions. Seashore regions or something. Shoreline, that's the word I'm looking for. Shoreline. Littoral regions of Japan. Southern Japan. According to Beal, damage in Honolulu was estimated at $2 to $3 million 1934, and termites had the ability to hollow out a wall in just 3 months. In an area of dead bald cypress trees in Lake Charles, Louisiana, termites were reported colonizing trees up to 70 feet in the air. A 640-acre area located in a bend in the Calcasieu River near Lake Charles, Louisiana, at the Texas border, was used as a test area. Dredged material killed the bald cypress trees on the site, and all of them were heavily infested, and the ground was honeycombed with tunnels. Chlordane, dieldrin, and Paris green, arsenic, were recommended by Beal to control termites. He reported that Formosan termites can eat through asphalt, plastics, rubber, lead, lime, mortar, and plaster. I have seen them eat through the bottom of plastic and even galvanized steel garbage cans. Beal cautioned that Formosan termites could spread all over the U.S., where native termites were endemic. Formosan termites were introduced to the Algiers Naval Station around 1945 in infested dunnage that was parked on the wooden dock. Since these termites tolerate creosote wood preservative, they colonized the dock. By the time the mistake was realized and the dock set on fire, the termites had already burrowed into the riverbed. Because of the culpability of the U.S. Navy in bringing this pest to our shores, Beal's paper was suppressed by the U.S. Forest Service while research was quietly being done near my house in Berman Park, just outside the main gate of the naval station. I was lucky to get a copy of Beal's paper at all. By 1990, we moved down Farragut Street to bigger digs on an acre property nearer to General de Gaulle Drive and the G&O Bridge. In-laws came to live with us. This property was at a lower elevation on a soil with a higher clay content and huge termite swarms in May and June. We felled a couple of grossly termite-infested trees on the property and were starting to get calls about termite problems elsewhere. The first tree termite jobs recorded by us were in 1991, not surprisingly in zip codes 70114 and 70131, Algiers. By 1991, I was already assembling a database that listed tree species, zip code, treatment mode, cavity size, and date of treatment. We were flying blind and possibly illegally at the time, for there were no pesticides labeled for use in living trees and no published treatment techniques to go by. The first chemical we tried was lindane, a gamma isomer of benzene hexachloride. That was an organochlorine that is now banned. It was labeled as a general insecticide for things like bark beetles and wood-boring insects. We didn't think of trying chlordane, which was a common termiticide that was still available at the time. We must have done a couple of hundred treatments with lindane by simply drilling a hole near the base of the tree and pumping in about 5 gallons of solution at the bark beetle label rate. This went on from 1991 to 1993, when permethrin came onto the market. But even some of the earliest 1991 tree treatments, particularly of big nut-all oaks, Quercus natali, and pumpkin ash, Fraxinus profunda, trees in Algiers were already significantly hollowed out, conditioned for watermelon rind by 1991. This indicated that the termites had already spread all over Algiers from the Navy base in the 50-year period since 1945. Permethrin, a product of FMC Corp., was the first termiticide that was approved for use in living trees. We immediately began to use it in routine tree termite treatments. I have a record of several hundred of them in my database. Still, a lot of our treated trees became reinfested. At the time, the thinking was that trees acted as a host for a parasite, like pine bark beetles. At that time, I'd already recorded over 70 different species of trees that were infested with termites. Damage to some species seemed to be heavier than others. About 10 species of trees, mostly exotics from China, were found to be termite-free. I interpreted this as varying resistance to termite infestation or varying food preferences by the termites. I attempted to correlate tree species with termite resistance, sort of like a rank of hands in a poker game. I sent data off to a friend who was a researcher for the Rand Corporation in California. She reported back that there was no statistical correlation between tree species and relative susceptibility. My theory, therefore, was caca. Something else was going on. We soldiered on with the permethrin treatments until 1996, when FMC introduced another new pesticide, bifenthrin. Bifenthrin was more expensive and less effective than permethrin, and I was still suffering an unacceptably high percentage of treatment failures. But I became the darling of the chemical pesticide industry for this brief period. Then came the apostasy of March 20th, 1997. Apostasy. I get another drink quickly. Okay, now we're going to go back to the 1960s. So this is late 60s, apostasy. While a student at Duke University, Duke Forestry, I was running out of coursework. My advisor, Dr. William Stambaugh, insisted that I stay on another year. So, various professors put me on some special projects. Dr. Ralston, the soil scientist, had me analyze a battery of soil water samples to assess mineral content. In the summer, Dr. Stambaugh, the pathologist, put me on a project to figure out the biology of cylindrocladium, a nasty nursery disease fungus. In late '69, I did a survey of the literature. There was a reference to a fungus that could kill termites. I kept the paper. This termite killer is a member of the Entomophthoralis, a group of specialized insect-killing fungi that is discussed elsewhere. One of my clients in 1997, going forward now to 1997, was Dr. Don Greer, a medical mycologist who had graduated in a class before me at the Tulane Medical School. He'd done a stint at a Tulane clinic in Cali, Colombia, before returning to New Orleans. When I asked him about getting an isolate of this malai fungus, he told me that his PhD dissertation was on a close relative, Basidiobulus ranarum, and he just happened to have an active culture of the fungus I was looking for in his lab. He prepared a few plates for me. I dropped by his house one evening and picked up a few standard disposable plastic petri dishes with active cultures on them. I ground them up in a warring blender with an aliquot of water, diluted the solution out to 4 gallons, and injected it into bore holes in 2 cypress and 1 sycamore tree located on the corner of Montague Street and St. Claude Avenue in the Bywater on March 20th, 1997. Thus began my apostasy and fall from grace. To this day, these trees are still alive and termite-free. By May 1997, I was mixing our fungus with Steinernema carpocapsae S. filiae, or Heterohabiditis bacteriophora, termite-eating nematodes, as well as other termite-eating nematode species with good results. I call this mixture of a fungus and a roundworm pork and beans. Hundreds, thousands of tree treatments followed. I tweaked the formula by adding a small amount of imidacloprid to the mix. At very low doses, imidacloprid premise becomes a semiochemical, unable to kill insects directly, but able to change their behavior to make them more susceptible to the biologicals in the mix. It gets them smoking and drinking. By 2000, I was still getting a nagging failure rate of up to 10% of all treatments. Then, on April 11th, 1998, while drilling and treating a hollow 23-inch DBH water oak in my yard, DBH, I think, is like the diameter, like you put your arms around it. You measure the tree at breast height. I think that's what DBH is. Let me go back to this sentence at the start here, DBH. Then on April 11th, 1998, while drilling and treating a hollow 23-inch DBH water oak in my yard, I heard a hollow sound as the termiticide solution splashed into the borehole. I injected 4 gallons, wondering how much more solution will this tree take? I hooked up a garden hose to the borehole and cranked it up. The water ran for 10 hours at 500 gallons an hour, never filling up the borehole. 5,000 gallons. This tree must have been connected to a vast underground void. I'm guessing that the high specific heat of water also cooled the subterranean termite warrens down from 37 degrees to closer to an ambient 25 degrees Celsius, that's Celsius, both of them, and made the termites more susceptible to infection by my pork and beans. Okay, here's what I don't understand about this sentence. It says, I'll read it again in a minute, but you got high specific heat of water. That sounds like high heat, but I don't know what specific heat means. Like, oh, it's specifically something. High specific heat. Wouldn't that heat it if it's high heat? Wouldn't, but it says it cools. The high heat cools. That doesn't make sense to me, but let me read it again, and here we go. I'm guessing that the high specific heat of water also cooled the subterranean termite warrens down from 37 degrees Celsius to closer to an ambient 25 degrees Celsius and made the termites more susceptible to infection by my pork and beans. So the high specific heat of the water cooled the warren. What are the limits of the amount of water that an infested tree will accept? From then on, I'd use a pulse chase technique, squirting a few gallons of fungus plus nematode contaminated water, pork and beans, followed by a few thousand gallons of water, and then pulsed with more pork and beans into the borehole until the flow was capped at 10,000 gallons. This is the total 24-hour discharge of a garden hose at full pressure. So if at your house you turn on the garden hose in full blast, let it run 24 hours, you'll get 10,000 gallons, plus minus. The cost of water then became an issue. The cost of water plus sewer charge for 10,000 gallons amounted to $80. So one day you run your hose full speed, you pay $80. Or so at the time, $80 or so for 10,000 gallons of water. Most treatments easily took 10,000 gallons. The number of retreatments or treatment failures plummeted. What are the outer limits of water that a New Orleans tree would accept? I treated a group of trees at a heavily infested apartment complex in Algiers on June 4th, 2002, and chased them with 500,000 gallons of water, and it all disappeared into the earth. This added about $4,000 to their water bill, and they complained bitterly, but did pay for the service. This started a major rethinking of my termite theory. Suppose that the trees are not hosts for Formosan termites in the classic sense, but perhaps function as appliances for drifts of megacolonies buried deep in the earth. All of South Louisiana sits atop hundreds of feet of alluvium deposited by the Mississippi River for millennia. River levels rise with spring floods to overtop the original riverbed to the second bottom, and so on. The largest particles, sand, are dumped nearest the riverbed. As the flood fans out, smaller particles, silt, clay, and finally organic matter, are deposited farther away. Over time, stream meanders change the location of the riverbed and the type of deposits over a single spot. The result is layers of sand, silt, clay, and prehistoric trees piled on top of one another. Suppose the Formosan termites are mining the organic drifts more than 100 feet down, rising up during mating season and using trees as an appliance to procreate. An infested tree, no matter how big it is just a footnote to what is happening underground. Termite technician Rose Brogy reported that termite activity in the French Quarter during the 2000 Operation Full Stop was highest along the river levee. An explanation for this would be that termites in the riverbed must emerge on dry land, otherwise they would drown. So, swarming and other termite activity would reasonably be heavier along the river bank. Okay, before I go on, I got a break here and we got some pictures. So I'll just show you these quickly. I don't know if you can see these well. They're not even very clear in the book because they're old black and white photos. This top one is Koch's postulates fulfilled. Our fungus growing out of Formosan cadavers that were naturally infected. Okay, so you got the fungus growing out of dead Formosan termites. Okay, now the second one is 430X, 430X, and you see the fruiting of our fungus from a knee joint of a Formosan termite. So that is the knee joint of a Formosan termite at 430X. And you see you see or you don't see the fruiting of the fungus. Okay, and then the bottom one here, that is 100X, Steinernema carpocopsi nematodes. Where's my camera? Where's my camera? There's my camera. So not much to see here, folks. Keep moving, keep moving. But that's 100X. I don't know if you can read that. Get it where you can read it. I'm just having camera fun here, just to see the legibility of the text with the camera. Maybe you can read that. That's that one. This is this one. 100X. Okay. Okay, let's have a little more fun, and then we'll get back to the text. See if you can read that bottom text. There you go. That's for the top picture. Okay, good pictures. Pictures worth 1,000 words, but let's get back to the words. And the caravel. Oh, this is a good story here. This is a good part of the story. A group of Canadians reconstructed John Cabot's historic 16th century caravel, sailed it down the St. Lawrence, down the eastern seaboard, around Florida, and up the Mississippi River. The ship ended up tied to a dock in the Industrial Canal in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans. You can guess where this story's going. The Canadians built the ship on top of a steel hull, but unwittingly used decay-prone northern woods. The entire structure, wooden railings, masts, and all, began to rot in our tropical heat. A friend of mine, a carpenter, and his crew were assigned to attempting to repair the ship with treated lumber. Though the ship sat in water connected to the pier with only ropes, it became grossly infested with Formosan termites. It was hauled up the Mississippi River to the foot of the Sunshine Bridge and scuttled there. The Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry fights tree termites. In 2000, the then Louisiana Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry, Bob Odom, pushed a $7 million plan to fight tree termites through the legislature. The money was appropriated to treat street-side trees in at least 5 parishes at $70 a pop. This covered the cost of treating 100,000 trees. The job was given to a group of residential termite PCOs who probably didn't know much about trees. Termiticides, mostly Termidor, were provided. Technicians moved down the streets drilling every tree, infested or not. Holes were drilled in less than 12 inches deep, mostly through solid wood and failing to hit the cavities deeper in. When chemicals were pumped into pecan trees near the UNO campus, folks objected about nuts becoming contaminated. Some of the chemicals went astray and were sold out of trunks of cars on the side of the road. Dr. Greg Henderson, the entomologist from LSU, went behind the tree drillers and found that only 7% of the tree population was actually infested. Therefore, the tree drillers enjoyed an immediate 93% success. When Dr. Henderson's crew analyzed bona fide termite-infested trees and chemically treated trees, they found 0% success. When Henderson went to report on this at the Entomological Society meeting in Montreal, his superiors at LSU forbade him to speak. So much for academic freedom at LSU, Louisiana's flagship university. So, I gave a presentation to the Entomological Society of America conference in Montreal in his stead. Do you have formosans? In South Louisiana, formosan termites, Termites, swarm at twilight around May Day until June. Heavy infestations look like a whirling snowstorm. Termite alates are attracted to lights, particularly in the blue range, fluorescent lights, and television screens. They can slip through the smallest cracks in window frames and end up in the kitchen sink or the bathtub. Alates, kings and queens, pair up, lose their wings, and look for a likely nesting spot. Swarming alates can boil up through the slab around sewer and water pipes. They boil up from the bases of trees or launch pads farther up. They can simply emerge from the ground, a general rising at twilight. Formosan termite swarms are spectacular. Termites have 4 castes: workers, soldiers, alates, and the queen. A disturbed nest may contain immature alates, which are larger than the workers, still white, but with a larger abdomen. Their wings are not developed yet. Formosan soldiers have round heads with pincers. The abdomen of a Formosan soldier is amphora-shaped. They have round heads, and they are more abundant than native Reticulitermes soldiers. Formosan soldiers are more aggressive, pinching your hand and holding on if you disturb a colony bare-handed. Native termites usually swarm in daylight in April around here. Formosans swarm at twilight, from Mother's Day to early June. Native termite soldiers have rectangular head capsules and more cylindrical abdomens. A Formosan worker can live for up to 2 years. A queen, almost the size of your pinky, can live for 20 years and lay thousands of eggs per day. Since she is immobile and must be fed by the workers, she can't fight other queens like bees do. Therefore, multiple queen colonies are possible, laying an enormous number of eggs per day. Quick sip, and we continue. Termites and the dead. Forensic entomology deals with insects that feed on corpses. By determining the species and life stages of insects inhabiting a rotting cadaver, details of time and death can be determined. It is a gruesome job, but somebody has to do it. On a hot summer day, I accompanied a group of mourners at a mausoleum in St. Louis No. 3 Cemetery off Esplanade Avenue and Bayou St. John. We were there to place the casket of our loved one 8 feet up in the air to her final resting place. While prayers were being said, I noticed a lot of tiny flies circling around us. Fruit flies? No, coffin flies. They developed from maggots feeding on the corpses in coffins stacked up in the mausoleum. The flies were tiny enough to squeeze through the smallest cracks in the coffins and the crypts containing them. I had a call from a lady in St. Bernard Parish. It seemed that honeybees nesting in the crypts of the Toka Cemetery were swarming out to sting the mourners as they laid flowers. So I brought some trap hives out there to catch the swarms coming out of the tombs and hauled the bees away. After a few years, the honeybees in the cemetery had been depleted. If Formosan termites were living and feeding off vast underground drifts of cellulose-based organic matter, where were they getting the necessary proteins? Decomposing wood, which is mostly carbohydrate, has little protein to offer. Lignin, the other major component of wood, has no nutritional value for termites. Lignin has no nutritional value. Indeed, termite poo is pure lignin. Lignin, composed of macromolecules with lots of benzene rings, does not decompose fast. But lignin makes a great chelating agent when added to planting soil. Protein and its building blocks of amino acids are hard to come by in wood. Proteins are nitrogenous compounds. Very few organisms can fix nitrogen from the air to build protein. Most notable are the bacteria in root nodules in legumes. There are others, but damn a few. So, where could a large population of termites gather enough protein to grow and expand? Perhaps they tap the rotting corpses that are stacked in our cemeteries. I didn't realize this when I drilled and treated a few oaks at the end of Canal Street and Oakland Avenue in 2000 to 2005, just across the street from the Metairie Cemetery. Those trees took on a lot of water, at least 10,000 gallons apiece. I did a lot of tree treatments near the 4 large cemetery complexes, Greenwood, Cypress Grove, Lake Lawn, and Metairie cemeteries at the west end of New Orleans. I treated a city-owned live oak in front of the Bywater Hospital, 2419 St. Claude Avenue, on July 28, 2004. This tree accepted an enormous amount of contaminated water, 50,000 gallons. As it turned out, the St. Vincent de Paul Cemetery was just 2 blocks away. Things got weirder in 2009. The city of New Orleans created a new small cemetery and contemplative garden at the end of Canal Street, next to the Cypress Grove Cemetery. They gathered up the remains of about 1,600 unidentified Katrina dead and placed them in a common grave topped by a monument. Surrounding the monument was a grove of bald cypress trees planted in the shape of a hurricane swirl. Almost immediately, these trees became infested with termites and I ended up treating them. The Lafayette Cemetery in the Garden District, 1 city block in size, contained 40 of the 210 termite-infested trees that were found in the entire 75 blocks of the Garden District. I'm going to read that sentence again because I read it a little fast, and I'm going to take a sip first. Also, when I'm a listener and somebody else is reading or just talking, and they shoot numbers at me, I don't catch the numbers. You know, I go, well, what number did you say? Was that 5,000 or 500 million? Because I'm not listening to the numbers. So here we go again with that sentence. The Lafayette Cemetery in the Garden District, 1 city block in size, contained 40 of the 210 termite-infested trees that were found in the entire 75 city blocks of the Garden District. That is, the 1 block containing the cemetery had 20% of the infested trees in the whole area. Treatment of these 40 trees around the cemetery took about 420,000 gallons out of a total of about 2 million for the whole Garden District. Okay, Ed Boards' termite dying experiment. In 2000, the New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board, under the direction of Ed Boards, took a few thousand workers from a termite-infested tree stump in Lafayette Park in downtown New Orleans and dyed them blue. They, then, were returned to their home back in the stump. A short time later, blue termites were turning up in an infested area at the back of Gallier Hall, 200 yards away. Termites from the tree stump colony had mined under St. Charles Avenue to the back of the building. By figuring the ratio of dyed termites to the total sample from Gallier Hall, Mr. Boards was also able to estimate the total colony size. Termites mining the waterways. We know that the original infestation at the Algiers Naval Station occurred when infested dunnage leaked termites into the wooden dock. It is reasonable to assume that they must have eaten their way down the creosote pilings and into the riverbed in order to be able to resurface on the other side of the levee and end up in Berman Park. During the federal Operation Full Stop, termite traps with stainless steel covers were drilled into the sidewalks throughout the French Quarter. Though not maintained for more than 2 decades, these round lids can be seen by tourists and are now part of Vieux Carré history. A group of technicians were hired at that time to check each and all of these traps monthly for termite activity. Little pieces of pine wood in the traps were replaced with a piece of cardboard impregnated with a slow-acting, non-repellent termiticide. This technique was pioneered by Dr. Nan Yao Su of Florida State. Workers were expected to take this chemical to the queen and colonies, slowly wear them down, and kill them off. This was a time-consuming and expensive process that went on for several years. The total budget was $34 million. Okay, we're going to come back to this. I'm going to show you a couple more pictures. Here's the John Cabot boat. Replica of John Cabot's 16th century caravel moored at the Industrial Canal. And I'll try to get the text in there if you can read it. Anyway, there's the boat. Okay, and then down below you see Adrian. That's Adrian alongside a sentinel tree. We'll explain sentinel tree in a little bit. Get the text in there if I can. Magazine Street. Sentinel tree. Okay, that's your boy. Let me see what it says here. Sentinel tree. This lone tree near the corner of Magazine Street and Jackson Avenue is connected to 4 cubic city blocks of termites. There he is again on Magazine Street. There's John Cabot's boat, replica. And let's keep going. Okay, Ed Boards, oh, we did that. The termite dying. Termites mining the waterways, and we're on the next page over here. Okay, we are half done, if you want to know. I'm on page 10. We got 10 more pages to go. I'm going fast. How can termites operate deep in the ground? We're after 10 o'clock here, but I'm going. Termites create waterproof walls around their colonies. The colony temperature is kept at or near human body temperature, 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which keeps pathogens out. Megacolonies in New Orleans can be several cubic city blocks in size and mine an almost unlimited volume of prehistoric cellulose laid down by the Mississippi River. In the absence of oxygen, they can acquire energy by converting cellulose to greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane by the formula. I'm not going to try to read this formula. I'm going to show it to you. Where is it? There is the formula. If you're a scientist or a chemist. Okay, that's the formula. If you got that, I don't know if you do or not. I don't know if it's like R minus B1, 4, but there's a comma. How do I say it? Anyway, here we go. Let's go with this. The oxygens in the B14 link can provide for a microaerophilic environment. Fitzgerald's. I like this story too because I remember Fitzgerald's restaurant out on the lake on pilings. There was another restaurant similarly built called Pure Orleans. The very first restaurant I ever ate, the very first time I ever ate crawfish was in Pure Orleans. But this one's about Fitzgerald's, if you remember that restaurant. Fitzgerald's restaurant sat on top of creosote pilings over Lake Pontchartrain on the west end of New Orleans. It was completely destroyed during Hurricane Katrina, and the pilings were pulled out and piled up on the ground nearby. Examination of the pilings revealed that termites had mined up from the lake bed through the creosote-treated pilings into the restaurant. This was just a few blocks from the 17th Street Canal breach, which flooded the city. Is it possible that the termites could have burrowed under the bed of Lake Pontchartrain and popped up in the bald cypress trees along the shoreline in Fontainebleau Park as well? Lessons from some termite jobs. Thumbing through the various databases through thousands of individual tree treatments would take a very long time to pick out jobs that would give us a teachable moment. Instead, I combed my memory for significant work and made a list. There are about a dozen or so treatments that I think of that are more. There are about a dozen or so treatments that I think of that are more important enough to write about separately. There's no more in there. Why do I add more when I'm talking? It's like Joey with the noodle soup. Noodle soup. Okay, I'll read that again. There are about a dozen or so treatments that I think of that are important enough to write about separately. Here we go. Critics have suggested that adding 10,000 or more gallons of water into a drill hole in a tree simply connected to a sewer or drainage system and not to a termite warren. True, if a tree was misdiagnosed with a termite infestation, it would not accept much water from a garden hose, less than 20 gallons. If a vertical void connected to an unstable fork, soon to fail, was encountered, it would accept a few gallons of water that would pile up in the trunk before squirting out of the drill hole once the hose was removed, or would squirt out of the tree trunk higher up. This is a cautionary observation about the stability of the tree and not an indication of termite infestation. A lady from Carrier, Mississippi asked me to help with a termite-infested tree in a rural area outside of town. It was a huge cherry bark oak, Quercus falcata, variety pagodifolia, near a shed owned by a health food guru. I can't read, I'm getting tired. I'm going to do it. It was a huge cherry bark oak near a shed owned by a health food guru out in the countryside. I drilled the tree, hooked up a hose to a water source, and ran 10,000 gallons. There were no sewer or drainage lines anywhere nearby, of course. We went out to a choose and cut Christmas tree farm near Pearl River, Louisiana, to pick out a couple of Christmas trees from a choose and cut tree farm just outside of town. Pearl River is just off I-55 near the Mississippi state line, a few miles south of Carrier. The trees were leyland cypresses, soft, green, and luxurious. After cutting a couple with hand saws, we noticed that they had central cavities with Formosan termites peeking out at us. I worried that if we stood an infested tree up for the holidays, termites could wander out and eat the wooden flooring. So I had to mix a little termiticide and pour it into the basal cavities while holding the trees upside down. A hollowed out Christmas tree created an engineering problem. With no holding wood in the center, it is impossible to drive a spike to hold it in the stand. A piece of wood had to be screwed to the bottom to secure the spike to the tree. Sentinel trees. I define a sentinel tree as one that stands alone, termite infested, and surrounded by lots of concrete paving. The paving can be a street, sidewalk, or the foundations of buildings. Termite alates boring vertically from warrens deep underground get deflected when they hit solid concrete or asphalt. They migrate randomly until finding a crack in the pavement or a tree. It seems to me that the root pan of a tree acts like a funnel to steer termites to the center of the trunk. Over years, or possibly decades, termites from under as much as 4 city blocks of paving can converge on this same spot, the sentinel tree. The internal damage to the tree is proportional to the number of termites migrating to it each year. But that one single tree is connected to a very great host of termites underground. The prudent thing to do is to throw the kitchen sink at them by way of a single borehole in the trunk of this tree and running as much contaminated water as is practical to this hole. Sentinel trees stood at Canal Place, Bourbon and St. Peter, a city block of the French Quarter bounded by Bourbon, Royal, Esplanade, and Governor Nichols, a small live oak in the CBD, and certain spots in the Garden District. Single trees would accept 50, 70, or 100,000 gallons of contaminated water or more, and the effect would be felt far and wide. A megamillionaire, who shall remain anonymous, had a sentinel tree, a small live oak in a courtyard behind his office in the central business district of New Orleans. It was surrounded by more than 4 city blocks of solid paving. The tree was shockingly hollow. I ran water to it for a week, returning to the site every day to add another shot of pork and beans. He also had termite properties on St. Charles Avenue, the Garden District, and even on the North Shore that I took care of over the years. He owned an island in Long Island Sound as well and complained that an infestation of gall wasp was killing the oaks up there. I recommended the Connecticut Department of Agriculture, remembering that chestnut blight guru Dr. Sandra Agagnostakis worked there at one time. No, he said, my island is in the state of New York, and their ag department is shit. By chance, I suggested that he hammer a series of ace caps, acetate, orthene 75W, into the trunks of the trees. Lo, his problem was solved without me having to leave my office. I treated other sentinel trees at Canal Place along North Peter Street, the corner of Jackson Avenue and St. Charles, and on Magazine Street. Catfish. Another sip for catfish. All right, now we're riding on fumes. Catfish. There was a fellow named Catfish who had a termite problem. He lived on Governor Nichols Street in Treem, just 1 block off Rampart Street. I drilled a couple of trees for him and sprayed his citrus orchard to control whitefly and scale. It was obvious that the wooden electric pole in front of his house was also infested with Formosan termites. I drilled the pole just as if it were a tree and found a small cavity inside. After squirting in a few gallons of the pork and beans solution, I stuck a garden hose nozzle into the hole and cranked up the water. The pole accepted 10,000 gallons of water before I shut the water off. Now, children, we all must agree that Electric poles do not have much of a root system. Termite-resistant trees. A client in Treen called me about a large termite-infested American elm tree in his yard. The elm was quite hollow and needed to be removed. Trouble was, this tree was wrapped into a large golden rain, Colreutheria paniculata tree. Golden rain is a native of China. Had co-evolved with the Formosan termite and is totally immune to termite attack. His golden rain was solid and healthy. The trick was to remove the elm without damaging the golden rain. Thereby, shade and other benefits of a tree could be preserved. There is a short list of trees that seem to be totally or partially resistant to mining by Formosan termites in heavily infested areas. Golden rain tops the list. Perhaps if golden rain were to be grown plantation style, its wood could be chipped and mixed with poplar and other trees to create a termite-resistant oriented strand board in new residential construction. Other trees of Asian origin include Oriental arborvitae, Thuja orientalis, China ball, Melia azadera, sawtooth oak, Quercus acutissima, Chinese pistachio, Pistacia spp, subspecies? I don't know what that is. Citrus, Japanese magnolia, Persimmon, Diospyros. In the ebony family, black tupelo, Nyssa sylvatica, and red bay, Persea bourbonia, have never been found to be infested. Okay. From this list, you may draw your own conclusions based on taxonomy. Termites and the levees. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast on August 29, 2005. The levees surrounding the city burst in 4 places. 1. At the Industrial Canal near the St. Claude Bridge, eastward into the lower Ninth Ward, killing 1,600 people in a 20-foot wall of water. A barge blew through the crevasse and ended up in the neighborhood. 2. Orleans Avenue Canal at Robert E. Lee, now Alain Toussaint Boulevard. Don't change the names of streets. That's me talking now. Don't change. You got a street, the street is the street. You don't change the names. Same with buildings, anything else. So, number 2, Orleans Avenue Canal at Robert E. Lee, now Alain Toussaint Boulevard, flowing westward. 3, Orleans Avenue Canal at Mirabeau Avenue, flowing eastward. And 4, the 17th Street Canal, just south of the Hammond Highway, flowing eastward. Most all of the city of New Orleans was flooded. Most all. Neighborhoods on higher ground near the natural river levee were spared. Algiers on the west bank was spared. The river came close, though, as debris floating in the river from the storm lay atop the levee afterwards. It was very close. We were too busy with our own Katrina problems. The roof shingles blew off our house, 6 pine trees collapsed in the yard, oak branches and debris filled the yard, and my pickup truck was looted. We were working with clients, removing tree debris, pruning and felling trees for almost a year afterwards. Tree crews from Ohio, Oklahoma, and Quebec came down to help us. An arborist from Wiltshire, England, booked flight from London to help us too. Though we didn't flood in Algiers, we were without electric power for a month. Things were in such disarray that I lost my petri dish cultures of the termite fungus for almost 2 years. When things quieted down, I ordered fresh cultures from a fungal herbarium. I selected 3 strains for safety and effectiveness and made an amalgam of them for future use. These cultures, serially transferred and maintained, carried us through the South Dakota bark beetle caper. The South Dakota bark beetle caper. And termite tree treatments from 2007 to the present day. The connection between termite mining activity and the failure of the levees came crashing in on me suddenly while drilling 14 infested water oaks in Algiers in October 2007. The trees were located in a low-income housing area just across General Meyer Avenue from the Algiers Naval Station. Figuring that termite activity had been going on in this area for 60 years, I expected them to be able to accept a great deal of water, a lot more than a mere 140,000 gallons. So, we hooked up a meter to a fire hydrant and a 4-inch hose, terminating in a long, specially made pipe with 14 spigots. To each spigot, we connected enough garden hose to reach each of the 14 trees. This required a pickup load of garden hoses. The advantage of using a metered hydrant over water taps from the buildings was that the client could get city water for half price, deducting the normal sewer fee. After the trees were drilled and treated with 4 gallons of water contaminated with pork and beans mixture, the hydrant was turned on. Each day, another round of pork and beans was pulsed into each tree while the hydrant was flowing at full force. After 3 days, the water was shut off and the tree holes were capped. The meter read a delivery of 1 million gallons at a cost of $4,000. All the water disappeared into the earth. Panic. In an instant, I realized that the earth under our feet was hollowed out and the entire levee system was moot. We put our home of 20 years in Algiers up for sale and bought another house on the North Shore. Okay, and here's a chart that he's made, a table, and I'm not going to go through it now. I'm just showing it. It says excerpts from the 2005 termite database. And the interesting thing here is that these are, you got the zip codes, you got the type of tree, the address, etc. Okay, I'm not going to go through this much right now. The important thing here is the 2 things, I think. The zip code. Every zip code is 70131. That's Algiers. Here's the species. You got a lot of birch, or a little bit of river birch, some river birch, a lot of red maple, quite a bit of sweet gum, 1 tulip poplar, 1 water pecan, and a lot of water oak. A lot of water oak. Okay, here we go. Blowing the bung. A little bit more to go here, a little bit more. Blowing the bung. Sometimes, when I drill into a termite-infested tree, the bit would come out of the hole covered with hard-packed, solid termite poo. When I tried to pump pork and beans into the drill hole with a backpack pump sprayer, the tree would not accept any of the stuff. The next tactic would be what I'd like to call blowing the bung. I'd hook up a solid brass nozzle to a garden hose, cram it into the drill hole, and hold it there while opening up the valve on the T connection. Line pressure from the water tap would be sufficient to blow out the bung of termite poo that was impeding delivery of termiticide. After shutting off the tap water, I'd be able to pump as much liquid into the drill hole as needed, followed by as much as 24 hours of flow, about 10,000 gallons, from the water tap. Yep, blow the bung. That's probably what happened to the 4 levee breaches. My database shows plenty of tree treatments in the vicinity of all 4 levee breaches during Hurricane Katrina. There was a lot of underground mining going on everywhere. What actually happened on August 29, 2005 was that a wall of water 20 feet high rose up the canals. Based on Boyle's law, P equals H times D, or pressure equals the height of a column of water times the density of water, 1 gram per cubic centimeter, the water column in the canals was exerting a lot of extra pressure on the sides and on the canal bottoms. If perchance the canal bottoms were connected underground to the neighborhood, a single termite-infested tree collapsing in the wind would be enough to blow the bung and release all this water until the levees and under the levees and into the neighborhoods. Entomologist Greg Henderson of LSU posited the same thing in his article, The Termite Menace in New Orleans. Did they cause the flood walls to tumble? American Entomologist, Fall 2008. Henderson observed that the expansion joints in the flood walls near the New Orleans Convention Center were infested, as well as trees around the building. Termites were eating through the oiled bagasse in the joints in the flood wall. He could see the river through the voids. In addition, Henderson noted that termite galleries have been observed 8.5 meters below ground level, and that termites could move 2,000 kilograms of soil per hectare per year. I'll read that again. 8.5 meters below ground. If you imagine 8.5 meters, it's really long. It's really deep. 8.5 meters below ground. And that termites could move 2,000 kilograms. Americans don't know what a kilogram is, but it's a lot more than a pound of soil per hectare per year. Okay, here we go. Henderson cited Chinese literature where most of Chinese levee failures were due to termite activity. From 1954 to 2001, 3,459 Chinese levees were damaged. Over 50% of them damaged by termites. An old Chinese proverb states, one white ant hole can destroy a 1,000 meter soil dike. I gotta read that again. One white ant hole can destroy a 1,000 meter soil dike. A white ant being a termite. Henderson went on to say that a large tree that fell near the 17th Street levee break may have contributed significantly to its collapse. He goes on, the precedent of termite damage to levees in China has been documented several times. Presently, little attention is being paid to my call for alarm, and I believe that the termites pose a continuing danger that requires immediate attention. Trapping termite alates and damage estimates. Dr. Henderson and his crew set up light traps all over New Orleans. These would light up between 7 and 10 p.m. every night. On swarming nights, alates would be collected and counted. We were part of this effort. Our house, the Donner Lodge, at the end of Farragut Street in Algiers, had the distinction of having the highest termite count by far of any other trap in the city. Starting in 1997, when I began treating and felling trees on this property through 2005, our alate counts dropped by 90%. In 1989, Henderson was averaging just 500 alates per trap during a termite season. 10 years later, trap averages rose to a whopping 17,000. A 1967 survey showed 4% of homes, 9% of telephone poles, and 4 to 9% of trees were infested. The 1992 passing of Hurricane Andrew saw 350 toppled in New Orleans. 30 to 50% of these trees were termite infested, according to Henderson. Termites in the Florida Keys. A fellow living in Marathon in the Florida Keys had a termite-infested avocado tree and ordered a care package of termite fungus from me. When we tried to chase the treatment with water from the hose, it became apparent that the flow was running straight into the ocean by way of the loose shell on this island. Ms. Nagy's log cabin. A lady in Northern California who was having a termite infestation of her log cabin called me. Termite colonies buried deep in the logs would be hard to locate and access. I sent her a care package. She sprayed it around and in her cabin and joyfully reported that the termites had disappeared. Similarly, ladies in Faubert-Marigny and on St. Charles Avenue rid their houses of drywood termites by spraying some of our fungus spores in their attics in December. Tax guy on the lakefront. A tax attorney called me to treat 2 live oaks on a property in New Orleans' lakefront. Everything went well. Turns out the owner was a tax lawyer. He took up my case. Miraculously, my 10-year dispute with the IRS miraculously disappeared. Garden District Survey and Treatment. In 2012, I was hired by the Garden District Association to do a survey of all the street-side trees in their neighborhood. This survey includes about 75 city blocks of million-dollar homes, bounded by Jackson Avenue to the north, Louisiana Avenue to the south, Magazine Street to the east, and Carondelet Street to the west. The survey counted 2,738 trees. Tree species, DBH, and condition were noted for each tree. Termite-infested trees were identified and located on a plat map of the area. 210 trees, or about 8% of the total tree population, were diagnosed with Formosan termite infestation and located on the plat. They were mostly scattered evenly over the 75 city blocks. However, the square bounded by Washington Avenue, 6th Street, Britannia Street, and Coliseum Street contained over 40 infested trees, significantly higher than the average for the Garden District. This block is the historic Lafayette Cemetery. The block is surrounded by a 10-foot high wall. The wall is a continuous crypt containing the remains of 1,000 notables, including the Queen of Mardi Gras of 1927. The rest of the cemetery is filled with crypts with a few thousand loved ones stacked on top of one another. If, as a tourist, you were to walk along the Washington Avenue side of the cemetery, you would notice a regular series of boreholes running near the bottom of the wall, all the way from Britannia Street to Coliseum. These are holes left by a previous chemical termiticide treatment. Why? Because the termites must have been so bad that even the dead were complaining about them. A year later, we were hired by the association to treat the 200 or so infested trees scattered all over the Garden District. The job took me 6 months, pumping billions of Steinernema roundworms and fungal spores combined with 2 million gallons of water. We mostly used tap water from cooperating homeowners adjacent to trees being treated. Sentinel trees and trees located too far from a water supply were treated specially. For these, a termiticide mix had to be loaded onto 9 30-gallon plastic barrels in the bed of my pickup truck. A bit of sodium thiosulfate was added to the water in each barrel to neutralize the chlorine in the city water before the biologicals were added. I used a portable electric generator to supply power to the termite drill. The water hose running by a gravity from the barrel to the tree was boosted with a cheap Chinese water pump powered by my truck battery. The neutral ground of St. Charles Avenue uniquely contained a half-dozen Formosan termite-infested oak trees. To get water to them, a hose had to be run across 2 lanes of traffic on St. Charles Avenue. I was parked on the curb facing oncoming traffic. When the coast was clear, I'd connect the pump to run water to the trees, stopping the flow as cars approached. The Lafayette Cemetery was a special situation. We had some 40 infested trees in and around this block. The cemetery had just 2 water taps, one located in the middle of the block on the Coliseum Street side and the other on the 6th Street side. I gathered up a pickup load of garden hoses, mostly borrowed from friends for this one-time operation. I figured that the cemetery was owned by the city. The Sewerage and Water Board was owned by the city, so what's the problem? I'd hook up each tap to 5 trees at a time using T-connectors to join all the hoses. Then I'd treat 10 trees and run water to them for a week. This went on for a month until I'd treated all 40 trees. My guess is that the operation used about 420,000 gallons of water or more. City employees are not known for their diligence, so after a few months, when the missing water was discovered, a leak was assumed and the taps were shut off. Oh dear. For a PCO to use chemicals on a job the size of the Garden District, it would have taken an oil tanker load of chemicals. Indeed, the Federals spent $34 million on termites in the French Quarter, which may have actually been controlled by me. And I did the Garden District for only $35,000, or 1/10 of 1%. 1/10 of 1%, right. So on the French Quarter, the Feds spent $34 million. The Garden District spent $35,000. In addition, our fungus and the Steinernema roundworms could go on and on, killing termites, multiplying in their cadavers in a nearly anaerobic environment, spreading out over the city years later. One could think of millions, billions of tiny microscopic Pac-Men gobbling up termites on their way underground. In the months that followed, there were no new termite jobs to be had in the Garden District. No old customers needing termite service. As a matter of fact, calls for drilling and treating trees for termites were dropping off all over the city. By this time, I had already moved to the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain. A few termite jobs were coming in dribs and drabs from Slidell, Covington, the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Morgan City, and even as far north as Bush, Louisiana. Politics. Wait, we got some pictures. Gotta get the pictures. Almost missed them. Going as fast as I can, guys. Bear with me. Here's Adrian again. Adrian with backpack getting ready to load pork and beans into a drill hole in an oak tree. On the Washington Avenue side of the historic Lafayette Cemetery, just out opposite the Commander's Palace restaurant, one of my favorite restaurants, in the Garden District of New Orleans, 2014. So that's near Commander's Palace. Okay, and then down here you got this wall of the cemetery, and those arrows are pointing at the holes, I think. Okay, that's the wall of the cemetery. Okay, what do we got here? Cemetery wall on the Washington Avenue side of the Lafayette Cemetery. Boudreaux. What are those holes? What are those little holes near the bottom of the wall? Thibodeau. Those are drill holes from a liquid termiticide treatment. I can't do a Louisiana accent. I ought to be able to, but let's start again. Here's Boudreaux. Boudreaux says, what are those little holes near the bottom of the wall? And Thibodeau says, those are drill holes from a liquid termiticide treatment. Boudreaux, what is in that wall? Thibodeau, coffins, cadavers, and bones. The termites must have been so bad that even the dead were complaining about them. Okay, if I could do that accent, I could have done that better probably. Adrian could do it. Where am I? We did the log cabin. We did the photos. We're almost done. We got politics. After the Garden District affair, I was approached by 2 enforcement goons who were employed by the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, who declared, we are initiating enforcement action against you. Outrage. This was 2015, an election year in Louisiana state politics. One way to fix my situation was to try to decapitate the LDAF by running against the incumbent Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry on the Green Party ticket. His name is immortalized on every gas pump and butcher scale in the state. My friend Stuart agreed to help me. It cost $600 to get my name on a statewide ballot. I had only $5,000 in personal funds to run a campaign. Somebody gave me another 50 bucks. I had some signs and postcards printed up. We ran some cheap campaign videos on Facebook with me holding a goat. The newspapers noted that I attended the school where the kid froze his tongue to a lamppost in the film Christmas Story. Nathaniel Hawthorne School on West 130th, Cleveland, Ohio. That was about all the press coverage I got. I pressed the flesh and kissed babies at various farmers markets and a festival in Crowley. The most fun was a political event in Livingston Parish. A whole bunch of candidates for statewide political office were gathered at a meeting hall dressed up in suits and smelling of cologne. Stuart and I showed up in green campaign t-shirts. I got aggressive, shaking hands with everybody one at a time and passing my card into their other hand, saying, "Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm running for Louisiana Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry. Vote for me." As I worked my way around the hall, I could see the incumbent, Dr. Mike Strain, DVM, at the other end of the room. Decorum suggested that I avoid him, but the devil spoke into my ear. I walked straight up to him, shook his hand, and repeated my spiel. He gave me a look of sheer horror and pulled his hand back. Well, had it not been for me, the incumbent would have been unopposed and not required to campaign at all. As it turned out, he got $1 million from the chemical industry and ended up winning decisively with over 1 million votes. I got 36,000 votes, the best for any Louisiana Green up to that time. It came out to costing me just 13 cents a vote. The incumbent spent over $1 each. What satisfaction. But as a political opponent, I am immune to further enforcement action by LDAF goons. Meanwhile, as the years drag on, new termite jobs in the New Orleans area dwindle. All those thousands of old customers don't need me anymore. Also, there are no opportunities to try it on other significant tree pests: emerald ash borer, hemlock woolly adelgid, phylloxera of grape, pine bark beetles, etc. It seems as if I am surrounded by an impenetrable wall of ignorance. I have to keep our fungus growing on a low burner, and there are no new horizons for it. It will work on a lot of other insect problems, but I'll never get the chance to try it. Termite diaspora. Reports of termites in levees in China. Termites in Japan. In Hawaii. 4 species of termites eating at the trees in Lahore, Pakistan. Didgeridoos from Australia being made out of termite hollowed wood. And termites spreading along the Gulf of America, from Florida to Brownsville and up the east coast to Charleston. I'm sure that agriculturists from neighboring states must look to the corrupt Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry for advice. I can easily imagine what that advice would be. Chemical treatments. Baits. Ignore the termites in the trees. Support your chemical pesticide industry. Lake Charles is trash, spreading termites into the Texas Gulf Coast. In June 2024, Hurricane Beryl, a weak Category 1, hit the Corpus Christi, Texas area. They were out of power for 2 weeks. Okay, one more picture. This is the late Jean Cherny Schaubhut. Okay, the late Jean Cherny Schaubhut. In addition to normal secretarial duties, she worked as a termite technician and compiled the Adrian's Tree Service termite database. She is holding a mass of termites from a tree cavity. Jean Cherny. Cherny means black. Czarny is black in Polish. It must be a Slavic name, Czerny. Schobhut looks more German, but we're all mutts, aren't we? Anyway, that's the end, except on the last page we have the next topics coming up. Other topics: chemical jamboree, entomophthoralians and their allies, Cedric Sidney and early termite treatments, chemical jamboree, my excellent South Dakota adventure. That's the one I want to hear about, but I like all of them. Let's see if you can see that. Okay, we are done. Thank you for listening, and I really appreciate it. I know it was long, but I wanted to get that out. It's important to me, it's important to Adrian, and I hope it's important to you. We will talk again. I got a lot of other things to talk about, but that was important for today. Thank you. Goodbye.